A widow accepted a house on a dangerous island as payment from her boss, but what she discovered there saved her family. Helena Brooks, mother of 4, had no choice. With an empty refrigerator and disconnected electricity, she agreed to the unthinkable: move her hungry children to an abandoned house on isolated Pelican Island. The boat cut through dark waters as her youngest clung to her waist. When they finally reached the shore and pushed open the weathered door, a frail figure stood in the shadows. A 98-year-old man stepped into the dim light, his eyes filled with recognition. "Helena Brooks," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I've been waiting for you." Before we dive into Helena's journey, please subscribe to this channel and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. This is a requirement from the platform to continue bringing you emotional stories like this one. Your support means everything. Now let's begin. The fluorescent lights of the Marina restaurant hummed above Helena Brooks as she scrubbed grease from the kitchen floor. Her knees ached against the cold tiles, and the sharp scent of bleach stung her nostrils. It was past midnight in Clearwater Bay, and the sound of waves lapping against the docks drifted through the open back door. Her hands, red and raw from chemicals, moved in mechanical circles across the grimy surface. 9 months had passed since Michael's funeral. 9 months since the fishing accident that took him from her and left behind 4 children who still asked when Daddy would come home. The restaurant manager had finally gone home an hour ago, leaving Helena alone with her thoughts and the endless work that barely kept them alive. She stood slowly, pressing one hand against her lower back. The digital clock on the wall read 12:47 a.m. In 6 hours, she would need to wake the children, dress them in their worn clothes, and somehow convince them that cereal with water instead of milk was perfectly fine. The electricity bill sat unpaid on their kitchen counter, a red notice stamped across the front: 3 days until disconnection. Helena dumped the dirty water into the sink and watched it spiral down the drain, wishing her problems could disappear as easily. The envelope in her pocket felt heavy, though it weighed almost nothing. Inside was her paycheck, 2 weeks late and $50 short of what she needed. When she had asked Elliot Chambers about the missing money that afternoon, his face had flushed red with shame. "I'm sorry, Helena," he had said, unable to meet her eyes. "The restaurant, we're having problems. I can barely keep the lights on myself." She had nodded and walked away, swallowing the panic rising in her throat. Another door closing, another wall closing in. The sound of footsteps on the wooden dock made her look up. Elliot appeared in the doorway, his grey hair disheveled, his shirt untucked. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes, and his shoulders sagged under an invisible weight. At 52, he looked 10 years older than he had at the beginning of summer. "You're still here," he said quietly. "Finishing up." Helena wrung out the mop and placed it in the corner. "I'll be gone in 5 minutes." "Wait." Elliot stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The restaurant suddenly felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken words. "I need to talk to you. About your situation." Helena's stomach tightened. She had seen that look before, the look people got when they were about to deliver bad news wrapped in false kindness. She braced herself against the counter. "I can't pay you next month," Elliot said, the words tumbling out quickly as if speaking them faster would lessen their impact. "I'm drowning in debt. The suppliers are threatening to cut me off. I'm probably going to lose this place by Christmas." The room tilted slightly. Helena gripped the edge of the sink, her knuckles turning white. No paycheck meant no rent. No rent meant eviction. Eviction meant social services. Social services meant losing her children. "But," Elliot continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "I have something else. It's not money, but it's shelter." Helena looked at him, confusion mixing with desperation. "I own a property on Pelican Island. It's been in my family for years, but nobody lives there anymore. The house is old, probably needs work, but it has a roof and walls. You could stay there. No rent, just take it." "Pelican Island?" Helena's voice came out hoarse. She had heard of the place, a small, isolated stretch of land a few miles offshore, accessible only by boat. Fishermen called it the Forgotten Island. Most people in Clearwater Bay had never even been there. "I know it's not ideal," Elliot said quickly, "but it's better than nothing, right? Better than the street. You and the kids would be safe there. Away from everything. Away from everything. The words echoed in Helena's mind. Away from the landlord who pounded on her door every morning. Away from the neighbors who watched her with pity. Away from the suffocating weight of failure that pressed down on her chest every single day. "How would we get there?" she asked. "I have a boat. I'll take you myself tomorrow if you want. Bring whatever you can carry. The house is furnished, old furniture but functional. There's a generator for electricity, rainwater collection, even a small garden that might still be salvageable." Helena closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, that accepting a house on an isolated island from a desperate man was the kind of decision that led to disaster. But what choice did she have? The red notice in her pocket seemed to burn through the fabric. Her children's faces flashed in her mind, Emma's serious eyes, Jacob's quiet sadness, Lily's confusion, and little Thomas, who had stopped asking about his father because the silence that followed was too painful. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll go." Elliot exhaled, relief washing over his features. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock at the South Dock. Pack light. The boat's not big." Helena nodded, already mentally cataloguing what they could bring. Clothes, blankets, the photo album, Michael's fishing knife. Everything else would have to stay behind. As Elliot left, Helena stood alone in the empty restaurant, surrounded by the smell of grease and cleaning supplies. Through the window, she could see the dark water of the bay stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the lights of Clearwater, Pelican Island waited. An abandoned house, a desperate solution, a leap into the unknown. She thought of Michael, of how he had always found a way to protect them, to make impossible situations work. "What would you do?" she whispered to the empty room. The only answer was the sound of waves against the dock and the distant cry of a gull cutting through the night. Tomorrow everything would change. Helena just didn't know if it would save them or destroy them. What awaits Helena and her children on Pelican Island? And why does an abandoned house still have a generator running? The morning sun barely broke through the thick clouds as Helena stood on the South Dock with 4 small suitcases and 4 frightened children. Emma, the oldest at 9, held Thomas's hand while Jacob and Lily pressed close to their mother's legs. The wind carried the smell of salt and fish, and seagulls circled overhead, their cries sharp and unsettling. Elliot's boat rocked gently against the weathered planks, a 15-foot vessel with chipped paint and a sputtering motor. It looked barely seaworthy, but Helena had learned not to question gifts from desperate people. She was desperate too. "Everyone in," Elliot said, avoiding her gaze as he loaded their meager belongings. His hands shook slightly as he worked, and Helena wondered what demons chased him. What debts had driven him to this point? What mistakes haunted his sleepless nights? The children climbed aboard carefully, their small bodies tense with uncertainty. Thomas whimpered as the boat swayed, and Emma wrapped her arms around him, whispering reassurances she didn't believe herself. Helena settled beside them, pulling Lily onto her lap. The little girl's hair smelled like cheap shampoo and childhood innocence about to end. The motor coughed to life, and they pulled away from the dock. Clearwater Bay stretched before them, grey water meeting grey sky in an endless horizon. Behind them, the town grew smaller, the only home her children had ever known, shrinking into a cluster of buildings and regret. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. The boat cut through choppy waves, sending spray across the bow. Helena tasted salt on her lips and felt her stomach turn with each rise and fall. The children huddled together, their faces pale and drawn. Jacob pointed suddenly, his finger trembling. "Look," he whispered. Pelican Island emerged from the mist like a ghost. Dark trees crowned a rocky shore, and through the branches, Helena could see the outline of a house, larger than she expected, 2 stories of weathered wood and broken shutters. The structure leaned slightly to the left, as if the island itself was trying to push it into the sea. No smoke rose from the chimney, no lights glowed in the windows. The place looked exactly like what it was, abandoned, forgotten, left to rot in isolation. Elliot guided the boat toward a small wooden dock that somehow still stood despite obvious neglect. The planks groaned under their weight as they climbed out, and Helena held her breath, expecting the whole structure to collapse into the water. It held. "The house is up that path," Elliot said, pointing to an overgrown trail that disappeared into the trees. "I'll help you carry everything up." They made 3 trips, hauling suitcases through tangled vegetation and overexposed roots. The air felt different here, thicker, older, heavy with secrets the island refused to share. Birds sang from hidden branches, their melodies both beautiful and unnerving. Something rustled in the underbrush, and Lily grabbed Helena's hand so tightly it hurt. The house loomed before them, even more imposing up close. Vines crawled up the walls like grasping fingers, and several windows were cracked or missing entirely. But the roof looked intact, and the front door, though weathered, appeared solid. "I'll leave you to settle in," Elliot said quickly, already backing toward the path. "There's canned food in the pantry, and the generator is out back. You just need to—" The front door opened. Everyone froze. Helena's heart slammed against her ribs as a figure appeared in the shadowed doorway, tall, impossibly thin, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. The man stepped into the light, and Helena gasped. He looked ancient. 98 years old, Elliot had said, but the number seemed inadequate to describe the weathered face, the translucent skin stretched over prominent bones, the shock of white hair that caught the breeze. Yet his eyes, pale blue and startlingly clear, held a sharpness that defied his age. "Who?" Elliot stammered, his face draining of color. "Arthur, you're supposed to be in Miami." The old man ignored him, his gaze fixed on Helena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He studied her face, her posture, her children clustered behind her. Then, slowly, his expression shifted from confusion to wonder, to something that looked almost like relief. "Helena Brooks," he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite its age-roughened edges. "You came." The world seemed to tilt. Helena's mouth went dry. "How do you know my name?" Arthur Montgomery stepped aside, gesturing into the house. "Because I've been waiting for you. Please come inside, all of you. We have much to discuss, and standing in this damp air does my bones no favors." Elliot grabbed Helena's arm. "I had no idea anyone was here, I swear. This house has been empty for years. I don't understand." "Go," Arthur said firmly, his gaze shifting to Elliot with something cold and knowing. "Your part in this is finished. I suggest you return to the mainland and make peace with your conscience while you still can." Elliot's face flushed red, then white. Without another word, he turned and practically ran down the path toward the dock. Within minutes, the sound of his boat motor faded into the distance, leaving Helena and her children alone with a stranger who knew her name. Arthur watched them with patient eyes. "I know you're frightened. I would be too. But please believe me when I say you're safer here than anywhere else. Your husband, Michael Brooks, he saved my life once, and now I intend to save yours." The name hit Helena like a physical blow. Michael, her Michael. How could this man possibly know him? Michael had worked as a fisherman, doing volunteer coastal rescue work on weekends. He had never mentioned an Arthur Montgomery, never spoken of saving anyone's life in a way that would create this kind of connection. "I don't understand," Helena whispered, her voice breaking. "You will." Arthur's expression softened. "Your husband was a remarkable man. What he did for me, most people would never have attempted. And what I'm about to show you, what he found and protected, will change everything for you and your children." He turned and walked slowly into the house. Helena looked down at Emma, at Jacob, at Lily and Thomas. 4 pairs of eyes stared back at her, filled with fear and confusion, and the desperate hope that their mother knew what to do. She didn't, but she had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, Helena led her children through the door and into the house where an old man kept secrets about her dead husband, secrets that somehow involved her family's survival. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like fate falling into place. What did Michael discover that connects Helena's family to this mysterious old man? And why does Arthur speak as if he's been expecting them? The interior of the house contrasted sharply with its decaying exterior. Polished wood floors gleamed under soft lighting, and furniture that looked expensive sat arranged in careful groupings. Clean white curtains filtered the grey daylight, and the air smelled faintly of lemon and old books. Everything seemed frozen in time, preserved with meticulous care. Arthur moved slowly through the main room, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the floor. Helena kept her children close, one hand on Emma's shoulder, her eyes scanning for danger that her instincts insisted must be hiding somewhere. "Sit, please," Arthur said, gesturing to a long sofa near the fireplace. "You must be exhausted from the journey. Would the children like something to eat? I have fresh fruit, bread, juice." Thomas's eyes widened at the mention of food, and Helena felt shame burn through her chest. Her 3-year-old was so hungry that a stranger's offer made him forget his fear. "That would be kind," she said quietly. Arthur disappeared into what must have been the kitchen, and Helena heard the sound of plates being arranged, a refrigerator opening and closing. Within minutes he returned with a tray laden with sliced apples, fresh bread, cheese, and 4 glasses of orange juice. The children stared at the abundance like it was a mirage. "Eat," Helena whispered, and they descended on the food with desperate politeness, trying not to seem as starved as they were. Arthur settled into a high-backed chair across from Helena. His pale eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I met your husband on March 14th, 2019, Arthur began, his voice taking on the quality of someone reciting a story, memorized through countless retellings. "I was sailing alone, foolishly given my age, when a storm caught me 5 miles offshore. The boat capsized. I clung to debris for hours, certain I would die in those cold waters." He paused, his gnarled fingers tightening around the cane's handle. "Michael Brooks found me. His fishing vessel was the only one brave enough to venture out in those conditions. He pulled me from the water, gave me his own jacket, radioed for help. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from hypothermia and pneumonia. When I finally tried to find him to express my gratitude, to compensate him for his courage, he had disappeared." Helena's throat constricted. Michael had never mentioned saving anyone. He had been humble to a fault, never seeking recognition or reward. But March 2019, that was the month he had come home with a bad cough that lasted weeks. He had told her it was just a cold from working in the rain. "I searched for years," Arthur continued. "I hired investigators, checked records, asked everyone in Clearwater Bay. No one knew where Michael Brooks had gone. And then, 6 months ago, I saw his obituary. Fishing accident, survived by his wife, Helena, and 4 children. Tears blurred Helena's vision. She blinked them back fiercely, refusing to break down in front of this stranger. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss," Arthur said softly. "When I learned he was gone, I felt as though I had failed him. But I also learned something else, something your husband discovered the night he rescued me." Before we continue with what Arthur revealed, if you're finding this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel. We're working hard to bring you these emotional journeys, and reaching 1,000 subscribers helps us continue creating content like this. Now, let's discover what Michael found. Arthur stood slowly, wincing with the effort. "Come with me, there's something you need to see." Helena hesitated, glancing at her children. Emma had finished eating and was watching Arthur with cautious curiosity. Jacob held Lily's hand, his expression guarded. Thomas had fallen asleep on the sofa, a piece of bread still clutched in his small fist. "Emma, watch your brother and sisters," Helena instructed, then followed Arthur down a narrow hallway. He stopped at a door she had assumed led to a closet. Instead, when he opened it, wooden stairs descended into darkness. The smell of damp earth and old stone drifted up, and Helena's pulse quickened. "After the rescue, Michael brought me here to recover before the ambulance arrived," Arthur explained, slowly navigating the stairs. He noticed something odd about the foundation. Being a fisherman, he recognized signs of water erosion that shouldn't exist inside a house. He investigated and found what I'm about to show you. They reached the bottom, and Arthur flipped a switch. Lights flickered to life, illuminating a tunnel carved through solid rock. The passage stretched ahead, its walls glistening with moisture, support beams placed at regular intervals. It looked ancient, yet surprisingly well preserved. "This tunnel was built in 1847 by smugglers," Arthur said, moving forward with surprising determination for someone his age. They used it to move goods from ships to the mainland without detection. When my grandfather bought this island in 1920, he discovered it but kept it secret. Even my own children don't know it exists. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and Helena stopped breathing. Wooden crates lined the walls, some open to reveal gleaming silver. Metal boxes sat stacked in corners, and on a central table, jewelry sparkled under the lights. Emeralds, rubies, diamonds set in gold and platinum. But what caught Helena's attention was the single piece of paper lying atop one of the boxes. A letter, yellowed with age, written in handwriting she recognized instantly. Michael's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, tears spilling down her cheeks as she read his familiar script. "Helena, if you're reading this, then Arthur found you, and I'm likely gone. I discovered this place and told no one but Arthur. This wealth belongs to him, but he insists it should go to my family if anything happens to me. I refused because it didn't feel right, but Arthur is a stubborn man. If you need this, if our children need this, please take it. I love you. Always. Michael." The letter slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the ground. Helena's legs weakened, and she grabbed the table for support. The chamber spun around her, reality fracturing into impossible pieces. "Everything here is yours," Arthur said quietly. "Not just the contents of this tunnel, but my entire estate. I have a farm in Georgia, a tourism company in Miami, investments worth millions. My children are wealthy in their own right and expect nothing from me. But you and your children, you carry the legacy of the man who gave me life. That means something." Helena couldn't speak, couldn't think. Her mind refused to process what she was hearing. "I've already had my lawyers draft the papers," Arthur continued. "Everything transfers to you upon my death, which, given my age, won't be long. But there's something you should know." He paused, his expression darkening. "My son Nathan doesn't agree with my decision, and when he finds out what I've done, he will do everything in his power to stop it." "Anton, who is Nathan Montgomery, and what lengths will he go to reclaim what he believes is his inheritance?" Nathan Montgomery received the call at 2:47 p.m. while reviewing acquisition reports in his Miami penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Biscayne Bay, where yachts carved white trails through turquoise water. His assistant's voice carried unusual hesitation. "Your father's attorney is on line 3. He says it's urgent." Nathan set down his scotch, irritation flickering across his sharp features. At 48, he had built his own empire in commercial real estate, but his father's fortune, the Montgomery legacy, had always been his true inheritance. The farmland in Georgia alone was worth $8 million, the tourism company another 12, and the investments, carefully managed over decades, represented generational wealth. Put him through. What followed was 5 minutes that shattered Nathan's carefully constructed future. Arthur Montgomery had revised his entire will. Everything, every asset, every dollar, every piece of property, now belonged to a widow named Helena Brooks and her 4 children. Strangers, nobodies, people his father had known for less than 48 hours. "This is insanity," Nathan said, his voice dangerously calm. "My father is 98 years old. Clearly he's not mentally competent to make such decisions. Mr. Montgomery underwent a full psychiatric evaluation last week," the attorney replied stiffly. "He's been declared sound of mind. The will is legally binding." Nathan ended the call and hurled his phone across the room. It shattered against the marble wall, glass tinkling like broken promises. His reflection stared back from the darkened television screen. A man who had spent his entire life waiting, planning, expecting what was rightfully his, only to have it stolen by some desperate woman and her burden of children. He made 3 more calls. The first to his younger sister, Victoria, who gasped and immediately began calculating her lost inheritance. The second to a private investigator who specialized in finding leverage. The third to his attorney, a ruthless man named Marcus Blackwell who had built his career destroying problematic people. "I want everything on this Helena Brooks," Nathan said coldly. "Every mistake, every vulnerability, every reason the courts might deem her unfit to receive this inheritance, and I want it by tomorrow." "Understood. And if we find nothing?" Nathan's jaw clenched. Then we create something. By the following evening, he had assembled a complete profile. Helena Brooks, 33, widow, 4 children, evicted twice in the past year, worked as a janitor, struggled with bills, no criminal record but plenty of instability. The kind of person who could be painted as opportunistic, manipulative, someone who preyed on elderly men in their final days. Perfect. Nathan drove to Pelican Island on a rented speedboat, cutting through rough water with the same aggressive efficiency he brought to hostile takeovers. The island appeared through coastal fog like a judgment. He had visited this place only twice in his childhood. His father had always kept it separate, private, a refuge from the family he barely tolerated. The house looked better maintained than Nathan remembered. Smoke rose from the chimney, and children's voices drifted from somewhere behind the structure. Laughter. The sound grated against his fury like nails on stone. He pounded on the front door, not bothering with courtesy. Arthur opened it slowly, unsurprised, his ancient eyes reflecting neither fear nor welcome. "Nathan." I wondered how long it would take. "What have you done?" Nathan pushed past his father into the living room, where Helena stood frozen, a dish towel in her hands. 2 children peeked from behind her legs, their eyes wide with alarm. "What lies did you tell him? What manipulation did you use to steal my family's wealth?" "Nathan, stop." Arthur's voice carried surprising authority. "For you have no claim to indignation. I've given you everything, education, connections, startup capital for your business. You've made yourself wealthy without my help. This decision is mine to make." "You're senile. Any judge will see that. A 98-year-old man giving his entire estate to a stranger? It's elder abuse, financial exploitation." Helena stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "I didn't ask for anything. I didn't even know Arthur existed until 3 days ago. Convenient story." Nathan's gaze swept over her with contempt. "Poor widow, desperate circumstances, stumbles upon a dying old man with a fortune. Let me guess, you've been very attentive, very caring, making him feel important in his final days." "Get out of my house," Arthur said quietly. "Your house for how much longer?" Nathan pulled folded papers from his jacket. "I've filed a petition for guardianship, claiming mental incompetence. My attorneys are also investigating the circumstances under which this woman entered your life. If there's even a hint of coercion, I'll have her charged with elder fraud." Helena's hand flew to her mouth. "I would never—" "Save it for the judge." Nathan turned back to his father. "You're making a mistake. These people will bleed you dry and disappear the moment you're gone. But I'm your blood, your legacy. Everything you built should stay with your family." "Michael Brooks was more family to me than you ever were," Arthur said, each word sharp as broken glass. "He saved my life without asking for anything in return. You've spent 48 years asking what I could give you. That's the difference." The silence that followed felt combustible. Nathan's face flushed deep red, his hands clenching into fists. For a moment, Helena thought he might strike the old man. Instead, he laughed, a cold, bitter sound that held no humor. "We'll see what the courts say. Enjoy your temporary charity, Mrs. Brooks, because I promise you, by the time I'm finished, you'll wish you'd never set foot on this island." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Through the glass, Helena watched him disappear down the path toward the dock. Her legs felt weak, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He's dangerous," she whispered. "Arthur, maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe I should just leave before—" "No." Arthur gripped her arm with surprising strength. "That's exactly what he wants. Nathan has spent his life taking what he desires through intimidation. He won't win this time. I have the best attorneys money can buy, and the law is on our side." But Helena saw something in the old man's eyes that terrified her more than Nathan's threats. Doubt. A flicker of uncertainty about whether even the law would be enough to stop a man who had nothing left to lose. That night, as Helena lay awake listening to her children's breathing in the adjacent room, she heard Arthur moving restlessly downstairs. The house creaked and settled around them, and somewhere in the distance, a boat motor echoed across dark water. Nathan Montgomery was coming back. Not with lawyers and petitions this time. He was coming with something far worse. What desperate measures will Nathan take? when he realizes legal channels won't give him what he wants? And how far will a desperate man go to reclaim an inheritance he believes is his birthright? The storm arrived 3 nights later, transforming Pelican Island into a fortress of wind and rain. Lightning split the darkness in jagged white lines, and thunder shook the old house until Helena feared the walls might collapse. She moved through the rooms, checking windows, her flashlight beam cutting through shadows as the generator hummed its uncertain song. Arthur sat in his chair near the fireplace, a blanket across his lap, his breathing labored. The stress of Nathan's visit had taken its toll on his frail body. His skin looked paper-thin, almost translucent, and his hands trembled when he reached for his tea. "You should rest," Helena urged, kneeling beside him. "Go upstairs where it's warmer." "I'm fine here." His voice rasped like wind through dry leaves. "Old men don't sleep much anyway. We spend too much time remembering." The children had finally drifted off after hours of flinching at every crash of thunder. Emma held Thomas close, his small body curled against her protective embrace. Jacob and Lily shared a blanket, their faces peaceful in sleep despite the chaos outside. Helena checked her phone for the 100th time. No signal. The storm had severed their connection to the mainland, leaving them isolated in ways that made her pulse race. She tried to convince herself it was paranoia, that Nathan wouldn't dare come here during a storm, but something cold and certain whispered in her gut that danger was coming. At 2:17 a.m. she heard it, the sound of a boat motor cutting through the storm's roar. Helena rushed to the window, pressing her face against the rain-streaked glass. Through the darkness and sheets of water, she saw lights approaching the dock. Not one boat, 3. Dark shapes moved with military precision, securing lines, climbing onto the weathered planks. "Arthur," her voice came out strangled. "Someone's here." The old man struggled to his feet, his cane clattering to the floor. "Get the children. Now. Take them to the tunnel." Helena didn't question. She ran to the bedroom and shook Emma awake. "Get up. Wake your brother and sisters. We need to go downstairs, quickly and quietly." Emma's eyes snapped open, instantly alert to her mother's fear. She began rousing the others as Helena grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with whatever she could reach: water bottles, blankets, the letter from Michael. Footsteps on the front porch, heavy boots against wood. Then voices, muffled by the storm but unmistakably aggressive. "Open up. We know you're in there." Arthur moved toward the tunnel door with surprising speed, his age momentarily forgotten in the face of danger. Helena herded her children down the stairs, their small feet stumbling in the darkness. Thomas began to cry, and she pressed her hand gently over his mouth. "Shh, baby. We're playing the quiet game, remember? Like hide and seek." They reached the tunnel just as something slammed against the front door upstairs. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Men poured into the house, their flashlight beams cutting through rooms like searchlights. "Find them. Montgomery said they're here." Helena's blood turned to ice. Nathan had sent them. He wasn't even here himself, too careful to implicate himself directly. But these men, whoever they were, had orders. Arthur locked the tunnel door behind them and leaned against it, his chest heaving. "Keep moving. There's another exit at the far end, near the eastern shore. It comes out in the rocks. Take the children there and hide until dawn. I'll hold them off. I'm not leaving you. You have no choice." Arthur pressed something into her hand, a key. "This opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Clearwater. Everything you need is there. The will, documents, proof of my mental competency. Get to the mainland and give it to my attorney. His card is in the deposit box too." "Arthur, please." The door shuddered as someone threw their weight against it from above. Wood groaned but held. "Go!" Arthur's voice cracked with urgency. "Protect those children. That's what Michael would have done." Helena grabbed her children's hands and ran deeper into the tunnel. Behind them, she heard Arthur's cane tapping as he positioned himself, heard his voice calling out in defiant challenge. "You want to face an old man in the dark? Come on then. Let's see how brave you are." The tunnel stretched endlessly before them, water dripping from ancient stones, their breathing echoing off walls that had witnessed a century of secrets. Emma carried Thomas now, his arms wrapped around her neck, Jacob held Lily's hand so tightly, Helena feared he might hurt her, but the little girl didn't complain. Behind them, the door finally gave way. Men shouted, flashlights swept the tunnel, and then she heard Arthur's voice cry out in pain. Helena's heart shattered, but she couldn't stop, couldn't turn back. 4 children depended on her, 4 lives that Michael had entrusted to her care. They reached a fork in the tunnel. Helena chose left, praying it led to the exit Arthur mentioned. The passage narrowed, forcing them to move single file. Water sloshed around their ankles now, cold and black. "Mom," Emma whispered, "someone's coming." Helena looked back and saw flashlight beams bouncing off the tunnel walls, growing closer. They were being hunted. She pulled her children into a small alcove, pressing them against the wet stone, and switched off her flashlight. In the absolute darkness, Thomas whimpered against Emma's shoulder. Lily's breathing came in quick, frightened gasps. Helena wrapped her arms around all of them, feeling their small bodies trembling with terror. The footsteps grew louder. Men's voices echoed through the tunnel, crude and threatening. "They can't have gone far. Search every corner." Helena closed her eyes and thought of Michael, of his strength, his courage, his unshakable belief that love could overcome anything. She felt the weight of his letter in her pocket and made a silent promise. "We will survive this, whatever it takes." The flashlight beam swept past their hiding spot once, twice. The man paused and Helena held her breath until her lungs burned. Then from somewhere above came the wail of sirens, distant but unmistakable. The man cursed and ran back toward the main chamber, his footsteps fading. Minutes later, more voices filled the tunnel, but these were different, authoritative, official. "Police, anyone down here, identify yourself." Helena's legs nearly gave out with relief. She flicked on her flashlight and called out, "Here, we're here, please help us." Officers appeared, their uniforms soaked, their faces grim but kind. One of them, a woman with gentle eyes, knelt beside the children. "You're safe now, let's get you out of here." As they emerged from the tunnel into the grey dawn, Helena saw police boats surrounding the island, men in handcuffs being loaded onto vessels, and there, standing near the dock with his head bowed in shame and relief, was Elliot Chambers. He had called the police. Despite his own fear, despite the danger, he had finally done the right thing. But where was Arthur? Helena scanned the crowd desperately until she saw paramedics rushing into the house with a stretcher. Did Arthur survive the attack? And what will happen when Nathan Montgomery realizes his carefully planned assault has failed? Arthur Montgomery survived, but barely. The paramedics worked on him for 20 minutes before his heart stabilized enough for transport. One of Nathan's hired men had shoved the elderly man against the stone wall when Arthur refused to reveal where Helena and the children had hidden. The impact had caused internal bleeding and 2 cracked ribs. Helena stood in the hospital waiting room 3 days later, her children asleep in plastic chairs around her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the smell of antiseptic stung her nostrils. A doctor emerged through double doors, his expression carefully neutral. "He's asking for you," the doctor said, "but keep it brief. He needs rest." Arthur lay in the hospital bed surrounded by monitors and IV lines, looking smaller and frailer than Helena had ever seen him. But his eyes, those sharp blue eyes, still held their familiar clarity. He smiled weakly when she entered. "You made it," he whispered. "Because of you." Helena took his hand gently, feeling the papery skin and prominent bones. "You saved us." "No. Elliot saved you. I just bought time." Arthur coughed, wincing with pain. "He told the police everything about Nathan's threats, about the men he hired, about the plan to force you off the island. Nathan's under arrest. They're charging him with conspiracy, assault, attempted kidnapping." Helena's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry this happened. If I had never come to the island, then I would have died alone with my wealth, going to a son who never loved me." Arthur squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "You gave me purpose in my final days. You let me make things right. That's worth more than you'll ever know." Over the following weeks, the legal machinery ground forward with relentless precision. Nathan Montgomery's trial became a spectacle that filled courtrooms and newspaper headlines. His attorneys argued temporary insanity, claimed he acted out of concern for his father's well-being, painted Helena as an opportunist who had manipulated a vulnerable elderly man. But the evidence destroyed every argument. Recorded phone calls where Nathan discussed fabricating evidence, testimony from the men he hired who turned on him to reduce their own sentences, Elliot Chambers' heartbreaking admission of his own complicity and shame, and Arthur himself, appearing in court despite his weakened condition, speaking with eloquent fury about his son's lifetime of greed and entitlement. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Nathan Montgomery received 8 years in federal prison. Helena watched from the gallery as they led him away, his expensive suit and arrogant posture unable to hide the defeat in his eyes. She felt no satisfaction, only a hollow sadness that wealth and inheritance had turned a father and son into bitter enemies. If you've been following Helena's journey and want to see more stories like this, please subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these powerful narratives. Thank you for being part of this community. Arthur passed away 6 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep at a private facility in Miami. He had lived to see the will executed, the assets transferred, and Helena's family secured. His final words to her, spoken during their last visit, echoed in her mind constantly. Take care of them. Build something beautiful. That's all Michael ever wanted. The farm in Georgia sprawled across 200 acres of rolling hills and ancient oak trees. The main house needed work, new roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint, but it had good bones and even better potential. Helena stood on the front porch on their first morning there, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Emma and Jacob chased each other through the tall grass, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. Lily picked wildflowers near the fence line, creating bouquets she would present to her mother with solemn pride. Thomas sat on the porch steps, building towers with wooden blocks Arthur had included in the house specifically for him. The tourism company in Miami now had professional management, generating steady income that provided more security than Helena had ever imagined possible. The investments continued growing, ensuring her children would have opportunities she'd never dreamed of. College, travel, choices beyond mere survival. But it was this farm, this land, that felt like home. Here, surrounded by space and peace and possibility, Helena could finally breathe. Could finally grieve properly for Michael, could finally believe that maybe, just maybe, they would be okay. She had donated the historical jewelry to a museum, where it now resided in a permanent exhibit, honoring the smugglers and fishermen who had shaped Florida's coastal history. Arthur's name appeared on the placard, alongside a mention of Michael Brooks, the humble fisherman whose courage had started everything. Local farmers had welcomed Helena with surprising warmth, offering advice about crops and livestock, helping repair fences and clear overgrown fields. She hired 3 families to work the land, sharing the profits equally, creating jobs in a community that needed them desperately. On Sunday mornings, she took the children to the small church in town, where they sat in the same pew each week and sang hymns that reminded her of her mother. Emma had started taking piano lessons. Jacob joined the local youth group. Lily made friends with every child she met. Thomas grew stronger and happier each day. But sometimes, in the quiet hours after the children slept, Helena would sit on the porch with a glass of sweet tea and look up at the stars. She would think about the impossible chain of events that had brought them here. Michael's courage, Arthur's gratitude, Elliot's redemption, even Nathan's greed serving as the final test of their resilience. 6 months after moving to the farm, Helena planted an oak tree near the western fence line. She buried Michael's letter beneath it, along with a photo of him holding newborn Thomas. Emma helped dig the hole. Jacob watered the sapling. Lily placed stones in a circle around the base. Thomas patted the dirt with his small hands. As the sun set over the Georgia hills, casting long shadows across land that now belonged to her children and their children's children, Helena knelt beside the tree and whispered the words that had lived in her heart since that first night on Pelican Island. "Michael, we made it." The wind rustled through the leaves, carrying her words up toward the sky where they mingled with birdsong and the distant laughter of children who would never remember being hungry, being scared, being hopeless. They were home, finally and possibly beautifully home. Thank you for following Helena's journey from desperation to hope, from loss to redemption. If this story moved you, please share it and subscribe to our channel for more emotional narratives that remind us of the power of courage, kindness, and unexpected grace.